Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Andrew Rossow with What's the Legal? And today I have a very, very special guest. His name is Jason Harrow, and he is a constitutional law attorney. He is the Chief Counsel and Executive Director of Equal Citizen. And I'm really excited about this because with what our country has been witnessing for the past several months, and with a pandemic at our hands, I think Jason is the perfect person to just help us break down con law with respect to our political landscape. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here. Happy to do it, Andrew.
So, Jason, for those who may not be familiar with the work that you do, can you shed some light on who you are and how you got into the political legal landscape?
Sure. So I'm an attorney. I'm currently, as we speak, in Los Angeles, but I grew up on the East Coast and went to law school about 10 years ago, and then worked and clerked for some federal judges and worked for the New York Attorney General. So I was on the East Coast then. At the time, I had always had an interest in democracy and constitutional law, of course, and appellate litigation. So for those unfamiliar, folks like you, Andrew, that do criminal defense, you're in trial courts a lot. When you get to the appellate level, you don't really argue to juries. You don't argue as much about facts. You argue more about the law and more to judges. And I always really liked that part of the law and did moot court in law school. And with the special interest in constitutional law and on voting rights law and our democracy. And after 2016, I thought that it became clear, as it had been for many decades for folks paying close attention, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention, but that some of the weird systems in our constitutional universe were just not producing the solutions that people need. And I mean that in a specific way, right? I mean that the people need solutions to problems. They don't need rhetoric. They don't need culture wars. They don't need cable news. The pandemic has made this very clear, but people need jobs. They need, licensing reform, for instance. They need healthcare reform. They need cheaper, better access to healthcare. People need, at a global level, we need to solve climate change, right? I mean, we need to understand global competition between China and other things. So the problem is that the political system is really not set up to do a great job of solving those problems, as I came to realize. And it's not set up to solve those problems for a couple of reasons. One is that there's a fundamental inequality in the way we vote, right? So how can it be that Hillary Clinton can win 3 million more popular votes, but lose the presidential election? That creates weird incentives that make solving problems and getting that legitimacy really difficult.
And it's confusing to the average person.
Absolutely. And that's difficult because, we need losers to sort of understand the system and accept that people in good faith are working towards solving their problems rather than that we're all enemies. And the other aspect of it is with the amount of money flowing into our politics and the incredible polarization of cable news and of online sources and the like, and the fact that corporations and wealthy individuals can just make us more divisive than ever, give big donations to candidates and politicians and have them sort of do their bidding and not the bidding of the average citizen, or at least that's the way it's perceived by many people. Sure. That again makes this idea of solving problems very, very difficult. So I wanted to do something to think about how to solve those problems, how to put our system on a more equal footing, how to make every voter equal, both in terms of just power, how much their vote counts, but also in terms of having some power against large donors. And so the way we think of it, just to sort of conclude the overview, the way we think of it is that reforming some of these systems, going back to one person, one vote, eliminating the corruption of unlimited campaign donations and Citizens United. That is not the most important problems in our democracy. I mean, my goodness, especially now in this pandemic, solving the public health crisis and getting people working and getting the economy working for everybody is clearly a bigger problem than, the way we vote or not, which happens, only once every 4 years. But we have to get that thing right in order to solve the problem. So those are the kinds of problems that I like to work on.
Yeah, and to your point, what would you think, and this may be a loaded question, but what do you think is the biggest misnomer, the biggest myth, either in the political legal landscape that is just plain wrong, or just something that you see every day in practice that you're just like, I understand why people think it's this when it's completely just opposite?
Sure. Well, I think that the biggest, well, look, it depends what you mean by people think. I think that there's a myth right now that this election was fraudulent or unfair or rigged in some sense. Candidly, that I think that's a politically motivated campaign to delegitimize the results of the election, and perpetrated mostly by one candidate, Donald Trump. And it's not really a good faith argument, but nonetheless, it's a myth that people have. I think the broader myth that people have is that our politicians are somehow bad people, right? That they don't, that they are somehow corrupt merely because they are politicians. I think that's not true. I think that most politicians of both sides, I think that they want to do right. I think they want to solve problems. I don't think most of them go to Washington, D.C. thinking, great, I just get to fight and do nothing, right? And pass no legislation and just argue with people and have yet another fight about the same old things on Fox or CNN or whatever. I don't think that. I think they want to solve problems, and the myth is that they're bad people or they're not trying. What the reality is that we have a system that doesn't let them solve those problems, that doesn't require them to be responsive to their constituents. So I think that's the myth reality distinction that I would give.
And we are, this is how I feel, but we are a society of labels, Jason. There's always a label for something. And if you don't fall within that label, it's foreign, it's wrong, it's corrupt, it's strange. How would you distinguish the roles that a traditional, I don't even know if traditional is the right word, but what is the role that a politician plays differently than that of somebody such as yourself, a licensed attorney who understands constitutional law, who's familiar with the electoral process? How do you distinguish the two?
Well, obviously, lawyers have obligations to courts and to clients, and politicians don't, right? And so politicians can sort of say whatever they want, and they don't have to be put to the proof of the courts. I think that's one thing that we're seeing the line blur a little bit, where people like Rudy Giuliani, who are supposed to, uphold their oaths to the profession, are just being very political in terms of parroting lines that are political lines and not legal lines, and making up legal theories that are ridiculously far-fetched, and repeating conspiracy theories and putting before courts, facts that, or supposed facts that are not supported by anything. And that's against the oath of attorneys, right? Attorneys are not allowed to bring frivolous cases. They're not allowed to bring cases only for the purposes of delay or harassment. And I think, unfortunately, we have seen some lawyers really blur that line. Look, we wish that politicians also had an obligation to tell the truth, and politicians only had an obligation to make reasonable arguments and not frivolous arguments, but they don't.
And, following up on that, and, Jenna Ellis, for example, President Trump's senior campaign advisor, who's, an attorney to my understanding, how would you, if you feel comfortable, describe her role? And the reason I say that is, there's been a lot of questions as to the blurring of lines of that of a political responsibility versus a lawyer's ethical obligations, as we just briefly, went over, to not bring frivolous lawsuits, to advise in a way that is consistent with, the law in our landscape. How would you describe that, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, look, we don't know the internal discussions that Jen Ellis is having or that Rudy Giuliani is having. They're to some extent attorney-client privileged. Sure. And also he kind of keeps, switching gear. People get coronavirus, people get added to the legal team, people get dropped to the legal team. So I can't speak necessarily to Jen Ellis in particular. But what I can say is that this one role of the lawyer is to tell the client, you got to stop, right? This, I can't make that argument, or that's not going to fly, or this is a waste of time. And clearly he has people who don't do that, right? Clearly he has people who are willing to delve deeper and deeper and deeper into the conspiracy deep end to just make stuff up and sow discord and sow uncertainty. I don't think that Jenna Ellis and Rudy Giuliani, I'm doing a little bit of psychology here, I don't think that they think they have great cases. And I don't think that they think they're actually going to win them. I think that they think, well, if we just throw a bunch of stuff at the mud, we can just show our support to Trump and we can undermine Biden. And we can make it so that people have doubts, right? Because they don't need to be convinced that Trump won. There's not a lot of evidence of that. But maybe the Venezuelans hacked something. Maybe Biden didn't get as many votes as they say. Maybe ballots were stuffed. Maybe something was amiss in Detroit or Philadelphia or Atlanta. And it's that sort of disinformation and a lack of confidence in the system where they are, I think, irresponsibly part of a legal campaign whose goal is to just have people throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to believe, and that's a shame.
And going off the notion of we the people, the Constitution is for the people, by the people. How has this ongoing battle that I think has finally come to an end over, trying to overturn Pennsylvania's popular vote, how does that affect our legal landscape? What impact does it have on our foundation as a country?
Well, we don't know. In terms of the impact this year, it has no impact. Pennsylvania's results are not changing. The vote of the Electoral College has already occurred. Nothing unusual happened. All of the Biden electors in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Arizona and Georgia and Nevada were seated and voted, and neither the state legislatures nor the governors said a word otherwise. So there are no legally appointed Trump electors in any of those states. So in one sense, it had no impact. In a broader sense, we don't know what the impact will be, right? What will happen in 2021 and 2022 with Trump out of power? Will he instigate a shadow presidency? Will he try and undermine Biden at every turn? Will he say that we need these drastic changes in election laws to make voting much more difficult, for instance? I don't know, right? It depends a little bit on him, and it depends a little bit on how long people's memories are. And it depends a little bit on where the Republican Party goes, right? I mean, I've written, and I think the evidence shows that the Republican Party should get rid of Trump, right? Trump is not a particularly great politician or a particularly popular figure. He didn't break 47.5% of the vote, for instance, in either of his elections. And he lost the popular vote twice. Well, okay, he squeaked out a narrow electoral college victory in 2016, but it's not as if he's Ronald Reagan winning 49 states and winning in a landslide. Why would you stick with this guy if you're the Republican Party? So, but we don't know what's going to happen.
And let's talk about equal citizens. You are the chief counsel. You're the executive director. Give us a day in the life of, what is the community impact that Equal Citizens strives out to set?
Sure. Well, we've got several types of campaigns and cases. But in terms of cases, we have several cases relating to the Electoral College and the way we vote and voter equality and this issue of corruption. And those are working their way through the system. So on some days, I'm writing legal briefs and got a chance to argue a U.S. Supreme Court case about the role of presidential electors in the spring, which is really exciting. And so that's a key component of our work. And then we're also doing advocacy. And so we're launching a campaign directed at folks in Georgia to say that these runoffs that are coming up on January 5th, which will be for control of the Senate, that those are really important, not just for what they mean for the Georgia seats, but what they mean for giving Joe a chance, right? And so the campaign that we're running is called GiveJoeAChance.us. And there we sort of explain that if you care about democracy reform, if you care about voting rights, Mitch McConnell cannot be the majority leader anymore, regardless of if you're a Republican or a Democrat, because he will block all of this at every turn. And so what we need to do is work to elect Democratic senators. And even if you want to vote for Republican in 2022 or a Republican candidate in 2024, fine. But for now, we just need to give Joe a chance to do something. So we're working on campaigns like that.
Very well spoken. Let's talk the Supreme Court arguing before such a prestigious group of individuals. I mean, what did you expect going in? How was that expectation met or not met? I guess on a personal level.
Sure. Well, I had no expectations because it was the first group of arguments that were conducted by phone in history. So it was after the court had pulled cases from the calendar and shut down the court to the public because of the COVID pandemic. And so, we've known what it's like to argue in the US Supreme Court for generations, and this was going to look totally different. So I had no expectations. In terms of actually doing it by phone, there were upsides and downsides. The upside was that I didn't have to go to Washington, D.C. I wasn't jet lagged. I was feeling good in my office in Los Angeles. And it was live streamed on C-SPAN. So many people know that the proceedings of the U.S. Supreme Court, when they occur in person, are closed, and there's only a few hundred people in the audience, and that's that. So people would have had to read about it the next day, or my friends and family would have had to get a summary of what happened, as opposed to here. What happened was they could tune in and they could listen to me and they could see me on TV, and that's really cool. And same thing with our clients, right? And that's cool and exciting. The downside is that you don't get to make your case as strongly. Trying to go through each justice for a couple of minutes on the phone, you just can't build steam for an argument in the same way. And I think many other advocates have found that too, since the Supreme Court has now held additional arguments by phone. It's just very, very difficult to sort of get 2 minutes or 3 minutes with each justice talking about, they might have totally disconnected questions. You can't really build up steam and make an affirmative case.
Well, it's hard to connect, to
That's right.
To each individual and be able to read what he or she is thinking and their demeanor. What advice would you have, or do you have, for students in school, law students who have an interest in election law, political law, the realm that you are a part of every day? What advice do you have for those who are looking to penetrate that industry or that field?
Well, I think that there's a lot of opportunity, right? I mean, the amount of litigation that is held leading up to elections and after elections has exploded in the last couple of decades. And so I think there are really interesting opportunities. And so, I think all the traditional places where people would look if people want summer jobs or internships or first job, places like the ACLU do a lot of great voting rights work. Lawyers Committee does great voting rights work. So just search around for who's doing really good voting rights work. Common Cause has been around and fighting for democracy for a long time. So I think that's key. And then, there's going to be a mix of politics, right? Unfortunately, we try to take it from a nonpartisan perspective, and I think we've done a pretty good job of it. But many other places are aligned with political parties or campaigns. And so folks who do want to, be more politically active or politically involved can also look to do voter protection and the like for campaigns themselves.
And how can they get involved with Equal Citizens if they wanted to? Is there anything that the average individual can do?
Sure. Well, our website is equalcitizens.us, and there we've got, links to support us and subscribe to our email list. And our main actions right now are at givejoeachance.us, where people can find their friends in Georgia. People can try and share information like this socially, because we've got to get out. And if people want to end corruption, we cannot have Mitch McConnell as the leader. And again, I don't consider myself overly partisan in terms of Republican or Democrat. I've supported both in my life. This is not a political issue. We're not saying kick the Republican Party out. We're saying kick Mitch McConnell out because he has dedicated his career essentially to blocking campaign finance reform, to blocking voting rights reform, to blocking gerrymandering reform, because he is all about political power. And those things put power back in the hands of the people, rather than politicians. And so if we want to have those reforms, we need to elect 2 Democrats in Georgia so that Mitch McConnell is not the majority leader anymore.
And final question, how has the technology that has been allowed to be utilized as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic into our legal landscape, how does that weigh into the future of our landscape? Do you think it has made it easier and difficult? Do you think it's only upwards from here? Where do you see the legal landscape going?
Well, I think that obviously COVID has made everything online, everything technological. And I think that's probably a good thing. Remote work is certainly here to stay. I like doing it. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm the only one in my organization who is. So we've done that for a long time. And then, in terms of the way we vote, it's still going to be a while until we have a really secure electronic voting system. And I think the reason is simple. The reason is that electronic voting systems that are right now connected to the internet are pretty reliable, but just not as reliable as a paper system, right? And to give an example, people often say, how come I can buy, everything on Amazon? How can I bank online with thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, and we can't vote online? Well, the reason is that there's fraud in both of those places, right? There's 1 or 2% of transactions are credit card fraud, and there's billions of dollars a year lost and messed up in the financial system. Now, that's okay. When there is an error in your credit card or somebody gets access to your credit card, right? And listeners will know this, or you might know this, Andrew. You call your credit card company, you're not on the hook for it. They pay a couple $100 or whatever the fraudulent thing is. They write it off as part of the loss, and that is what it is. So it's 99% secure, let's say. But the problem is that we're 99% secure is not good enough for voting, right? There are some systems that have to be 99.9999999% secure. And until we have that level of security for online transactions and secure online systems, and maybe we're getting there. Maybe the blockchain is part of it, or maybe other protocols. But until we have that level of security, I don't think that you will see massive voting using mobile or online. Right? There's been a shift to some amount of technology, especially registering online or getting a balloting online. But again, that's the difference between things that have to be 99% secure versus 99.99999% secure. So that's what I'd say to the technology answer.
That's a great way to end this, and definitely a wonderful food for thought as we approach 2021. Jason, what is the best way for those listening and or watching to get a hold of you? Is it Equal Citizens, or is there another
Sure.
method?
Yep. equalcitizens.us. You could sign up for our email list. You could send an email to info@equalcitizens.us, and we'll take a look at it. And great to have folks support.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and it's an inspiration to all of us who are watching this landscape evolve and develop. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Happy holidays, Andrew.
All right. Same to you.
Okay. Bye now.